Hello and welcome to another episode of Oh So Curious. And in the world of movies today, well, let's see. The Nun 2 is off to a fantastic start. It's off to like an $80+ million start at the box office. Shah Rukh Khan's Jawan is also up to like 55 some odd $1 million internationally. So that's like the highest opening for a Bollywood movie of all time, it looks like. So, that's doing the bonkers money. They've even got showings nearby at theaters where I usually don't see any Bollywood or Indian movies playing in general. We've, of course, got Oppenheimer still in theaters. Barbie is now available on digital. On the Oppenheimer front, though, it's now the highest grossing biopic of all time, passing Bohemian Rhapsody. It's also the third highest grossing movie of the year. It's in the 900 millions now. So it's crossed Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Now it only sits behind Super Mario Brothers and the Barbie movie, which honestly I don't think is going to get to those numbers, like 1.3, 1.4 billion. Barbie is now in that 1.4 billion mark, which brings it right in line with what Top Gun Maverick did last year. But Oppenheimer, it's the highest grossing movie for Christopher Nolan in the UK, which previously was Dunkirk, and he is from the UK, of course, so I'm sure he's proud of that. And that also helped Universal Studios as a studio cross $4 billion for the year. The second studio this year to do that, next to Disney. I think Warner Brothers is probably the third closest at this point, and then of course we got Sony up there as well, and Paramount, so all the big ones. But to talk about all of that and so much more with me today, I've got somebody new, somebody you guys might not have seen on the show before. I mean, you definitely haven't seen on the show before. So with me today, we've got Bridget. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Yep.
How's the weather over there? You're in LA, right? So how's the weather down
Yes,
there?
I am. It's getting a little bit cooler. I went out to the movies this week and I was leaving at 8 p.m. and oh my gosh, it was like, ooh, could feel the chill in the air. So fall's around the corner, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It
Yeah.
was like windy here on the East Coast a couple of days ago. Now it's like kind of warm, although it's not hot. Like, so I'm glad like it's starting to cool down a little bit. And certainly once the sun goes down, like the temperatures really cool off. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
fall weather.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of news coming out this week. Let's start with the Taylor Swift news because, well, she's been blowing up
Yeah.
the box office pre-sales. Taylor Swift's Eras Tour movie has now crossed $65 million in pre-sales, which
Right.
makes it very likely at this point, very likely to cross $100 million in opening weekend numbers, which is like a Marvel movie level opening weekend.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? The fact that this tour that's making upwards of $2 billion as a tour now is, pushing other movies out the way and going to be dominating box office in October.
I know. I mean, Taylor Swift is a force, that's for sure. I think if anyone ever underestimated her, I feel like this has been definitely the year of Taylor to kind of show just who's boss. She's got a huge, massive fan following that she's been building, I don't know, definitely a decade more than that. So I think I grew up listening to Taylor Swift too and really loved a lot of her older music, personally, more than her more recent pop stuff. But I'm still, I still respect the hustle in a way, although I know there's been a bit of controversy with her tour. Tickets selling out, it being really pricey, a lot of fans not being able to get tickets. That's, something I haven't tried to get tickets for the tour, but I know a lot of people that have and spent so much money to do it. So, at the same time, seeing her release it, the experience for people who weren't able to see it, I kind of feel like is a good way for people to still feel like they could participate in her Eras tour. I think that is kind of a nice meeting halfway with her fans in a way. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she's really, really going to be making a lot this year. that's
Yeah.
that's for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Absolutely. She's moving up the charts and like the most valuable list or like the richest pop stars
Totally.
and all that. Like it's she's
Yeah.
definitely like self-made, and this is probably the most popular, tour of any kind. I mean, in years.
Yeah.
Of course, we got Beyonce out there breaking some records too, but it seems like the Taylor Swift tour is just on another level. Like she
It
sold out SoFi
is.
Stadium multiple days in a row. Like that's an
Yeah.
80,000 people stadium. I did see this week that Cinemark is now doing what they're calling it Swifty parties. So you can book a
Hmm.
private theater rental and bring it
Yeah, I
and basically
bet.
bring up to 40 people, and it's like $800. So like I think that works out to like $20 a person. So it's basically the
Okay.
same amount that you would pay if you were to go see a normal movie in most markets. I think in parts of
Yeah.
LA, I'm sure it's more expensive than $20 a ticket, but um
Right.
like, what do you think about that idea of doing something like that? Like, because if you don't go to the concert, but you still kind of want to have this communal experience of watching it,
Yeah.
not just by yourself, now you
I
can bring up to 40 of you
right.
together to go.
I'm sure like yeah, and with social media these days too, I'm sure maybe it shouldn't be too hard for a Swifty to rent it and find a bunch of Swifties in the area and say, "Hey, this weekend guys, come to the party. Let's I don't know, whatever you do before a concert, pregame,
Yeah,
whatever, and then kind of show up and have your own concert." And I kind of feel like too, when you're just with a bunch of other Swifties, you can kind of recreate that experience, which I think is nice. There's no like, it's just like kind of you and people that like the same thing, and you can just sing and dance and have fun in that space. I think that's actually kind of nice for people to feel like they can still have that experience. And especially after COVID, I do understand. I think a lot of people, they just want more experiences that they've kind of lost out on in the last few years. So I do think that actually sounds like, even though I'm not a Swifty fan, I still think that sounds like a lot of fun.
absolutely. I agree. This is one of those things where you want to watch it with other people. And I mean, granted, you could go to just a normal screening, and I'm sure you're going to have a packed house because I was reading in one of the articles this week that they're not going to be playing this movie during the week. Like it will play as of right now 4 weekends in a row. But that
Mm-hmm.
adds a certain level of exclusivity, right? Like because you can't go see it in the middle of the
Yeah.
week, you can only go see it on the weekends. I'm sure that's going to further drive up demand. I mean, I can imagine this is
Yeah.
given how well the pre-sales have been going, it wouldn't be completely crazy to expect this movie to do 100 million on opening weekend and then get close to that number on the second week, which would be, like bonkers good because most movies tend to like be, even if, when they're front loaded, they start over 100 million, they'll drop to like 50 million or like a 40 million the next weekend because most everybody went and saw it. But with this movie,
Right.
you can't go see it during the week if you can't go see it on the weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's going to help with like the packing up the
Keeping all
theaters
the
and
seats full for sure.
exactly. Yeah. And of
Yeah.
course, I mean, like, AMC is distributing this and all like Regal, Cinemark, AMC, all the theaters. AMC is one of they're the ones who distributing the movie, even though it's playing in all of those
Hmm.
different branded theaters. So I'm sure they're going to look at this and say, oh, if in 4 weeks there's still plenty of demand, like it doesn't kind of, go downhill after 4 weeks, I'm sure they'll add more showtimes because that's what's been happening since this was initially
Yeah.
announced. They keep adding showtimes because they're just running out of seats, and these things are just
Yeah.
getting packed and packed. Like it
Yeah.
broke some records. Like $26 million was like the first day sales record at AMC, which previously was held by Spider-Man No Way Home. Like it's broken like Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War
Oh
records
my
with
gosh.
Fandango.
Yeah.
So it's huge. Is it some? So let me ask you: are you planning on going to check out the Eras tour in theaters at some point while it's it playing in theaters?
Yeah, when I was at the movies this week, they had a trailer for it at AMC, and I remember thinking, whoa, okay. But I wasn't like, I'm gonna go, but I don't know. I also don't know if I'll even be able to get a seat, it sounds like. If it is something that they do continue, which I think is, they're playing it safe, they're playing it smart. They're not going to open up a bunch of weekends if they're not exactly sure how many people are going to attend. And of course, making it only 4 weekends is really going to drive up the demand. And then, they're going to they will probably, release weekends when as long as they see that there is that demand still going. And then once it starts to dip, they'll probably, you know, which I know I'm probably not familiar with it, but right before the Barbie movie, they had like a Barbie world here. And I noticed the same thing. They had it open for like 2 months, and then they were going to end it in, I think, June. But then when I checked the calendar, I noticed they opened it up for 2 more months just because it had done much better, I think, than they'd expected.
Yeah, and why not? Like if this thing keeps flying high, like it has, like it's not just the fact that it's making so much money on pre-sales, and it's going to be playing exclusively on the weekends. We talked about it last week. Like Roland and I were discussing, there's 4 movies as of right now that have moved out of the way of this film, which is insane to think about. The fact that this is such a
Yeah.
phenomenon that it's knocked
Yeah.
out Priscilla. There was like a new Meg Ryan movie, and with David the Duchovny in it as well, and like her
Yeah.
rom com, her return into the rom com genre that got moved. There was another movie with the person who was in he was in Reacher. Alan Ritchson is in it, and Hilary Swank is in it. Like another like rom com sort of like got moved. So 2 rom coms moved. Priscilla, of course, based on Priscilla Elvis Presley and Priscilla, which they've been playing that at the festivals, and it looks like it's getting some good reviews. It's made by Sofia
Yeah.
Coppola, of course, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter. And then the 4th movie was The Exorcist. Now, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour is coming out on October the 13th, which happens to be a Friday the 13th. And The Exorcist Believer, the return of that franchise, was going to basically be that perfect horror movie to go see on Friday
Uh-huh.
the 13th. And
Of
that moved out of
course.
the way. It's moved a week
Wow.
forward, so you can go see it on the 6th. And then if you want to go see it on the 13th and you don't want to go watch Taylor Swift, then you can go see it. But it's caused all kinds of havoc because there's like this
Yeah.
said like code in Hollywood where studios try not to step on each other's toes when they decide when to release their movies. And with the way this was sort of done, it's like the studios weren't happy about the fact that, oh, she just kind of came in, they picked a date, and now all of us have to
Dropped
move our
her
stuff out of the
movie.
way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, hey, look, I guess if you can't find a ticket by yourself, I'm sure you can get maybe into a Swiftie party. Maybe there'll be one of those, and
Yeah,
when
yeah,
somebody
I'll try my luck.
yeah,
Yeah. It is
awesome.
interesting though, too, because just thinking back to when she released her Netflix movie, Miss Americana, I think she sold that to Netflix for about 25 million. So, I remember, especially with COVID, people saying that the theaters, what's the future of theaters? People might just Netflix and chill for the rest of their lives. But
Right.
with this, just seeing how much more she's made from releasing it in live theaters, I think is just proof that theater still got it.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where I think we can have a longer conversation about this some other day, but basically if you've got something unique, you can offer a unique experience, then going to a movie theater is still a draw. It's just we get a lot of formulaic movies that people just have, like, we've seen those before, so that's why I think those movies
Right.
struggle at the box office. Like if you just want to watch an average rom-com that you've probably seen 20 variations of in the past, you can always put it on
Yeah,
Netflix and watch it. But the Eras tour is pretty exclusive, and they're
it
doing
is.
whatever they can to make it even more exclusive, as you talked about, not playing in the weekdays. So yeah, it adds more value, more prestige by simply, it's a supply demand thing. So I think definitely the Eras tour, it keeps flying high. Let's see how much higher it can fly. Is it going to make $100 million in opening weekend? Guys, let us know in the
Yeah.
comments below. What do you think? Are you, hurrying up to the Cinemark near you and booking yourself a Swiftie party? Are you excited about this movie? Let us know in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe if you like this content. We keep talking about Taylor Swift every week because she keeps making headlines, and we'll keep talking about it when the movie comes out. We will talk about how much money it made and if it forces any other movies to move out the way. But
Yeah.
yeah, right now let's kind of pivot over and talk about something that's a little not so positive as the Taylor Swift story, right? So earlier this weekend, we got the news that Drew Barrymore has announced through her Instagram page. She put out a statement saying that, well, we're not going to bring the Drew Barrymore show, her daytime talk show, back after all. It was only a few days ago that she said she's bringing the show back, and it's a tough decision. They're not going to go against any WGA rules. They had a couple of writers on staff. Those writers, they'll move ahead without those writers. And she said that, this is greater than just herself. There's a lot of other jobs on the line from people who are working through other unions who are not on strike but can't work because all the shows and movies have stopped production. So she put out a statement today because she basically got attacked on social media, and then she's just been getting it from all angles, it seems like. And finally, she just gave in, it looks like, and said that, hey, we're not going to be doing this anymore. We'll wait until the strike ends. So if you just bear with me, I'll quickly read through the statement, and then I just want to get your
Yeah.
opinion,
Go
Bridget, on
ahead.
like what you think about this decision. So she said on her Instagram account, she mentioned that the let's see. Okay, where I just lost track. Okay, so she said, I have listened to everyone and I'm making the decision to pause the show's premiere until the strike is over. I have no words to express my deepest apologies to anyone I have hurt, and of course to our incredible team who works on the show and has made it what it is today. And then she finished by saying, we really tried to find our way forward, and I truly hope for a resolution for the entire industry very soon. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of context before you kind of give your opinion on this, Real Time with Bill Maher announced that they were going to come back during the week and on HBO, and it's traditionally been a late night show that is very scripted. So people were wondering how exactly are they going to manage. And then the WGA had said publicly that they were going to picket the show when Drew Barrymore's show would restart. So that was, probably leaning heavy on her mind. And then we also heard this weekend that The Talk, which is another daytime show, they also paused their plans for their season premiere. So it looks like this is having a knock-on effect. But like, just the Drew Barrymore news alone, I mean, what do you think about this as somebody who's out in LA, who's probably seeing this happen in real time around you? How do you, this took place over the course of a few days, from coming back to getting so much backlash to now saying we're just gonna wait. And like the fact that there are other people who are on the crew who have nothing to do with these strikes but have no jobs right now. Like, what about those guys?
Right. I think it is unfortunately such a complex issue, and I know too, as an actress, unfortunately, the way that the strike works is that it only works when everyone is on board and together, and we demand our needs. That's where the power really comes from. So it is kind of frustrating when you see someone who's going against that effort and kind of doing their own thing, because it takes away from the power of the group. But at the same time, I'm not one to, be like, oh my gosh, Drew Barrymore is a horrible person, because at the same time, I can see the good intention in it as well. At a time where everyone is out of jobs right now, in her mind, she probably thinks, well, I'm giving people jobs right now. I'm helping to preserve their income right now, even if it's just for a select few people. So it can feel like you're helping people, but at the same time, if people still keep doing that, then it weakens the power of the group, and we won't get the accommodations that are being requested. It's just it only prolongs it further. So it really does take the power of everyone being on board. And when things like scabbing or stuff like that happens, it just kind of, it hurts everybody, unfortunately. I actually I'm quite new to LA. I only moved out here in March when the strike started. So to be honest, I am not as familiar with how it was before that, but it's something that I hear all the time. And it's, even with fellow actors that I meet, it's definitely been hard on everyone, not just, writers, everyone that's involved in the industry. It's been really difficult. And I mean, I know a lot of actors too that are luckily able to do commercial work. Commercials are okay to do at the moment. So that's kind of where it's at for a lot of people. But, I've heard a lot of actors nervous that this won't be resolved until January is the rumor. So yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, to even think about the fact we're in September right now, January is like 4 months away. You got the holiday season. There's so much, and it's like different times of the year you have different opportunities. For example, like right now there's certain kinds of shoots and recording sessions and things that are being done for the holiday season that are not happening. There's so many other things that could would be going into production at the start of next year that we don't know when they're going to happen. It's unfortunate. Yes, there are, like you said, two sides to the equation. There's the fact that yes, there's a lot of people who are going to get back to work as a result of the Drew Barrymore show coming back, who have nothing to do with the strike. Personally, like they aren't part of the unions that are striking. And just as an example, the WGA went on strike before the SAG did, and it was like a month or so after the WGA strike began that the SAG strike began. So for that period of time in the middle when only the WGA was on strike, I mean, the productions were ongoing where they didn't need any writers, and like the Deadpool 3 was shooting, all these other movies like, the Marvel stuff and Disney. And I'm sure there's TV shows and everything, like late night shows had gone off the air, but there were other things that were still happening.
Right.
So there was that part of the argument that, well, if that was still going on and yes, they were picketing certain movies and stuff, and we had shows get shut down and get pushed back, like Daredevil, Born Again, and stuff like that. But it is a little tricky because I do feel for those people who will, again, not be able to work for however long this show, the talk, and we don't know what real time with Bill Maher, like what their plan is, if they're going to change their mind and stuff. So yeah, it is unfortunate because there is a lot of collateral damage as a result of that. Like there's real consequences, like people having a hard time keeping up with their rent payments, like on the verge of losing their house. Like those are real consequences. Earlier this week, I saw that California passed a new bill allowing people who are on strike as part of the SAG or WGA, they're going to be able to get insurance, which is fantastic news because obviously that's a big part of what the union provides for its members.
Right.
So in regards to the strikes, though, we did see this week that the WGA and AMPTP are going to get back to the negotiating table and they're going to restart talks. So they put out a statement, and the statement said that on Wednesday, September 13th, so the WGA reached out to the AMPTP, so this is this past week, and they asked for a meeting to move negotiations forward. We have agreed and are working to schedule a meeting next week, which is this upcoming week. Every member company of the AMPTP is committed and eager to reach a fair deal and working together and to work together with the WGA. So it looks like they're coming back to the desk, but I don't know what that exactly means because we've sort of had these stop and start things happen. We've also had a lot of dirt being thrown in each other's faces, whether it's like, oh, the WGA was like, certain studios want to make a deal. It's just, if they're willing to break away from the AMPTP to do it, we are more than happy to negotiate. And then the AMPTP basically calling BS on it. And then we have also seen infighting. There was in the WGA where a lot of the showrunners like Noah Hawley and such last week, they had a meeting scheduled with the negotiating committee, the leaders of the WGA, and that got canceled because they just, had a lot of arguments about what is going on. What can these showrunners tell their staff for these shows that are struck right now? Like, when can they get back to work? Because like there's so many people on the production side that are, again, not part of these unions who are out of work right now. So after all this infighting on both sides, now that they're finally coming to the desk, what is your hope? Like, because the WGA, is getting back to the desk right now. We don't know what's going on with the SAG negotiations at this time. I mean, they've sort of been going back and forth, but it looks like they're at an impasse there right now. And it seems like the AMPTP they can't really juggle the two balls at once. So they're either going to figure out the WGA strike first and then the SAG one. So what is your take on it? How long because you mentioned earlier that the rumor is January. Do you think it's possible that we can get a resolution to either one or both of these strikes before the end of the year?
Honestly, just from the back and forth and what I've seen on social media, they're not being super they're being pretty unrelenting, I feel. And it's difficult too, because I feel like it's difficult, the lack of work, but at the same time, just remembering that all of this is to protect people in the industry from being exploited. And it's kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but, pushing through for the long-term benefits. I think it's easy for a lot of people to maybe at this point to want to just settle for less and just to get it over with. But I really am hoping that when they meet, that people will kind of stick to their guns and, just remember what we entered this for, because we don't want to have to do this again in the next 10 years, hopefully.
Well, yeah. I mean, these deals are generally like 3 years long.
Right.
So there is the idea that maybe come up with a solution that kind of deals with some of the stuff that you can't agree on or are
True.
close on, and then and anything that they're so far apart on, like AI, for example. Then for those things, let's just maybe put that on the back burner for now, and then give yourself the
Yeah.
3 years between this new deal and the next
Just to get
negotiation to
some work
figure it out.
going. I mean, that's a
Or even like
possibility
sign a
too.
temporary deal. Like I follow a bunch of other people who provide commentary on this stuff, and I've heard the idea that why not just do an interim deal, something that maybe is only like a year long, and then that buys you that year's worth of time to make some headway into those points that you have absolutely no agreement on, that you're so far apart on that there's just no way for you to compromise, and then make a compromise on the other things, and then that way you can sort of get people back to work, productions restart, and while that happens, you can spend that 1 year of that interim agreement to figure out the rest. So I'm hoping that's like that could be the kind of solution we can reach. It's one of those situations where like we're used to seeing the government get shut down every few months because they can't agree on Capitol Hill for some reason. It might be happening again later this year. Who knows?
Right.
But like there's like some real consequences to these strikes happening in LA because it's industry wide, and it's not just people in LA, it's people all over the world.
Right.
Any production that is a signatory with SAG or with the WGA, and certainly any studio or company or streaming service that's part of the AMPTP. So here's to hoping that they'll find a solution, because there's a lot of collateral damage, and that's not just the people who are not
Right.
in those unions, but it's also collateral damage to people like Drew Barrymore, who
Yeah.
took so much abuse on social media that I think was not
Right.
entirely warranted. I mean, like people almost took it personally, which I can see where some of that comes from. But like, let's be, let's not try to like do a character assassination on somebody if all they're trying to do is bring a show back to put a lot of people to work, and they're trying to follow the guidelines. That's my personal feeling. I mean, again, guys, let us know in the comments below what you feel about like the Drew Barrymore situation. Her show is not going to be coming back until after the strike. Now she backed out from that commitment. We also thought that The Talk is not going to be premiering as per its usual September date, and then of course Real Time with Bill Maher, which announced that they were going to be coming back on HBO Max. We don't know what they're going to do, but like, it looks like there's a domino effect happening here, and of course the WGA and NPTP getting back to the table. Maybe there'll be a solution soon. Maybe there won't be. Who knows? Let us know in the comments, guys, what you guys think. Will we have a solution to the strike before the end of the year, or are we going to be waiting till January? And of course, like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. We are covering these strikes on a week-to-week basis. Anytime there's any significant news, you can come back here and check us out for more updates, and we'll do our best to keep you posted. So now let's kind of switch over and do some movie reviews, right? Like, that's for the love of movies. That's what Also Curious is all about. So this week, the movie that we went and saw is A Haunting in Venice, which is based on Halloween Party, a book by Agatha Christie. It's the third movie in this series of films where we have Kenneth Branagh playing the iconic Hercule Poirot. I think that's how you pronounce it, Hercule Poirot.
Yeah.
And he's back, and he's in Italy, and this has got more of a Halloween tinge to it. I mean, as the original book's name was, Halloween Party. What did you think about this movie? It's not a very long movie, but it's definitely got like some of those iconic cast members like the previous two movies were in this series. It's directed by Kenneth Branagh, but it's definitely not just a murder mystery. There's a little bit more going on. So tell me what you thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I thought it was a pretty decent movie. I did kind of become interested in Agatha Christie a couple years ago because I hadn't read a book since like 7th grade. So I started reading, and I was like, well, I love mystery. So I kind of, read And Then There Were None and a few of her novels. So I was really excited to see this movie because I really do like those classics. A funny thing is, though, I think I read And Then There Were None, and then I watched the movie, and of course at the end, the ending was completely different. And so then I was like, oh, I didn't like the movie. So I always recommend, just for anyone, if you're going to see this, maybe don't read the book first. I always think that just, sets up this expectation. And I haven't read the book yet. I think I will read it maybe this week after seeing the movie, but I I think I've heard it's a bit different. So, that's just one thing to keep in mind. But yeah, I think it was good, especially now that we're getting into Halloween season. I feel like watching this movie is definitely like a Kickstarter into that. Already, got me thinking about my costume this year. Might wear a mask. That seems like, what's in now, just from the movie.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I thought um, it was pretty good. When it first started, I did think it was a little bit slow to kind of get you into it. I'd say the first 10 minutes, he's with Tina Fey. She makes an appearance in this movie, and they're talking. And so once they kind of get into the storyline, it picks up. There's a murder, and then it's like, okay, what's going to happen next? And I really was kind of like, does really keep you on the edge of your seat, I think. Also, a couple jump scares in there. I've never been a huge fan of horror, but I did find these weren't too bad. So if you don't like scary movies, I think you're okay with this one for sure. But yeah, it was. Um, I think it was a little bit. I don't know. I was kind of comparing it a little bit to the Death on the Nile, which I felt was, like it was like night and day. I felt even just like the scenery of Death on the Nile, it takes place in this warm climate, lots of bright colors, and this felt very, dark, kind of muted. Right. The story too felt a little more understated. Not like a very big, flashy kind of haunted mansion situation. So I don't think it's a bad thing. In fact, I think, it just seemed like a bit of a kind of quieter, simpler movie. And I did enjoy it, I think. If I had to rate the Agatha Christie's that have come out now, being Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and now I almost called it a Halloween Party, A Haunting in Venice.
Yeah.
Personally, I wasn't actually a huge fan of the Murder on the Orient Express, probably because I'd seen the original right before and I was just comparing it too much. But I actually really did like Death on the Nile. So I would probably rank this in the middle. I think, that one was, and I think that this one actually did better on Rotten Tomatoes than Death on the Nile. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think it was, maybe I just like kind of the show more in that one. But yeah, I think if people want to kind of kickstart the fall season, this is a great choice.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It's a movie it's cerebral is one word I would use to describe it, and that's true of like a lot of these Agatha Christie based movies. Last year I also saw another movie which I don't know if it was based on an Agatha Christie story or not. It probably wasn't, but it was. It had Saoirse Ronan in it. It was called and a bunch of other like high A-list actors like as these movies usually do. I think it was called See How They Run, and it wasn't like the most impressive thing. Like it didn't feel particularly unique. And then of course the Glass Onion and the Knives Out, which Ryan Johnson and Daniel Craig are doing a fantastic job on. So the genre as a whole, I think it's in a good place right now. But this movie, I definitely agree with you, was much more of a limited in scope as compared to Death on the Nile, which felt like they just went like really big for the sequel to Murder on the Orient Express. Murder on the Orient Express, the new one, I personally still like that one the best of the three because the way it kind of plays out. And I also am kind of like a big fan of like movies that take place on trains or like, or movies on planes and stuff like, because it kind of, from a writing standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, it kind of backs you into a corner and get creative because you literally cannot get out of that location. But the cool thing this movie does is because there's this big storm happening and they're in this house in Venice, they're kind of stuck there the whole movie. So it's similar in that sense that is this like one location, although they have a little bit of, stuff happening in other parts of Venice at the beginning, at the end of the movie. But for the vast majority of its runtime, you are basically in that house, much like everybody that's trapped inside. And you really get to see, I think for the first time in these new series of movies with Kenneth Branagh playing Hercule Poirot, the detective kind of really struggling with his own like set of beliefs. It's like he starts off like retired and sort of not having his mojo, and then by the end of the movie spoiler alert, it seems like he's got it back and he's now, back in the game. And sort
Yeah.
of whatever motivation he had lost, he's regained that. So I did like the pacing of the movie once it gets going, but I do see where you're coming from that in the first 10 minutes, I think it's a little slow. It's I did like because it's the running gag with these movies with like the whole egg, and he likes his egg to be a very particular size and everything, and that's how he likes his breakfast. So like his all of those elements I think were fantastic because at this point in the series, if they're not going to spend a ton of time on it, that's fine, but it just going to give you a reminder of who this person is. But what I did like about Death of the Nile is they really went into his backstory of who he was during the war and how that experience helped shape him and his fears and what his motivations to do what he does. And in this movie, they also, it's kind of like if you watch him as a series, you're slowly peeling more and more layers off the background of Hercule Poirot and who he is as a person, what drives him, what are his fears. So as a whole, like as a series of movies, I do appreciate how they've sort of slowly developed this character while individually each of the movies can kind of stand on their own. I hope they keep making more of these because as you hinted at, there are a whole series of adaptations of these Agatha Christie books from back in the day, and you can probably go on iTunes and buy all of them. And I went down a rabbit hole, and I was like, "Oh my God, there's like a dozen of these! Like, I should probably see if I could get a box set of them." So I'm excited. I want to see more of this. Like, I love these. It's more of a thinking. You're not going in there to see some big action set pieces. It's not meant to be
Right.
like some kind of thriller film. There is some good acting performances in here, like Tina Fey, like of course Kenneth Branagh. I recognize the person who plays the bodyguard for Hercule Poirot. He was the bad guy in the second John Wick movie, and so I recognize him from that. Although like he looks like he's aged a little bit, or maybe they made him look a little bit older. But then again, the second John Wick came out like almost 10 years ago. So yeah, I had a good time. I'm looking forward to probably going to see it at least one more time in theaters, and then I hope that they make more of them because I'm sure they don't cost much,
Yeah.
right? From a production standpoint, there's
Right.
not a ton
You're
involved in
right.
these movies.
That's what I kind of thought too. But even at
Yeah.
the same time, just even the Venetian Palazzo itself, I felt like really lent itself to that, creepy cellar feeling. And it definitely, you're right, it probably didn't cost quite as much as other things, but you still really got that feeling. I like even with in the storm and that there's in one scene there's this log bumping up against the building and that really does create this element of like just unsafety and it's
Yeah. Yeah, particularly because like in that moment, I was thinking back to Casino Royale, and at the end of that movie, that whole house collapses into the river in Venice.
I was like this whole palazzo is just gonna
So right, or then when they say like, "Oh, this house has no basement," and then like they go and
yeah.
like, "Yeah, I don't want to be in that. Am I below the water line? I'm worried about my safety." So yeah, it's a movie that I think as far as horror movies goes, this is certainly closer to a Shutter Island than it is to The Exorcist.
Yes.
So
Right.
on the scary scale, or if you're not a big horror person, I think you'll have a good time at this movie because it's not a big horror movie. It's got the horror elements, and it's certainly more of a horror film than any of the previous two movies in this series.
Right.
But it's still at the end of the day a murder mystery, and a murder mystery that I think ends on a high note. And certainly they leave it pretty open ended. And like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing maybe more Hercule Poirot in our future. I know there's like a TV show that did like a British TV series that was adapting all of these series of books from Agatha Christie years ago. So if you can find that I think it's like there's BritBox is a streaming service you can get it on. So if you want to get more of these, and if you don't get more of these in theaters, then you can probably go watch the TV series. You can also go watch the original series of movies. But yeah, let's hope we can get another movie in the franchise because I think this is like it's a small franchise that doesn't need to make a lot of money to be viable, and it was unfortunate how Death on the Nile financially struggled because of all the Army Hammer controversy, and then
Oh
the
my
movie
gosh,
kind of
I
got
know.
it tied up between the
That
Fox
was
and Disney
crazy.
merger. So the whole movie kind of suffered for it, and
Right.
having so many other people work on the film, to have that one person kind of drag it down. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, the Haunting in Venice sort of sheds all of that and taking the franchise in a new direction, hopefully. So let us know in the comments below, guys. What do you think about A Haunting in Venice? Is this the best of the series so far? Does this rank above Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, or do you feel like this is not as good as either of those? Or if you have you even seen those other two movies? Did you know these are all connected? Let us know in the comments below, and of course, like and subscribe for more content like this. So now there was another movie that I went and saw this week.
Yes, The Inventor, right?
Yeah, so I went and saw The Inventor, and it's a very, it's a small movie. It felt like an indie movie. And when I say small, I'm not saying like, it was like, it felt like it was small in scope, and it was much more of an intimate affair, like, stop motion animation. It had some traditional 2D animation in there as well, kind of mixed in with the stop motion. In the credit sequence, they kind of give you a little bit of the peek into the behind the scenes of how they made it all happen. And it's really
Oh,
cool
neat.
always kind of watching that process. I mean, how
Yeah,
involved
totally.
it is. I believe like Universal put this movie out, and it's a pair of directors directing it, and is based on the life of Leonardo da Vinci. I don't think this is meant to be like, uh, a perfect portrait of his life as a real person, but it is more about, I think, Leonardo da Vinci as an artist, as a mathematician, as like an inventor, as just a thinker, and it really dives deep into his curiosity and trying to figure out like what is the meaning of life. And
Yeah.
while I think the central theme of this movie that it took me a while to kind of like land on this, because like when I walked out of the movie, I was like, what did I just like? I had no idea what I had. Like, I was a little lost on the reason for this movie existing.
Right.
But also like, I was literally the only person in the theater, as I found out when I like finally walked up and left during the credits. So I saw it, but then, in fairness, I saw it on a weekday afternoon. So I'm like, for a movie like this, which isn't like a big movie anyway, it's unlikely there will be. I didn't expect to be the only person in the theater, but I was. Um,
Wow.
but nonetheless, I think it's a movie that if you want to go see something that's lighthearted, it's got some good voice talent, like Stephen Fry voices Leonardo da Vinci. I think Daisy Ridley's in there. You have Marion Cotillard as well, voicing, I think, the mother of King Francis I. So there are some good moments in the movie. Ultimately, it kind of shows how Leonardo da Vinci's character struggled to really do everything he wanted to do as somebody who was curious about like what is life all about, what is the soul, what who are we on the inside. Like he would do his dissection with like dead human bodies, and that was of course seen as very macabre back in the day. So like they kind of show
Right.
like how he's doing that while hiding that from his royal employers. Like he starts off in Rome, and then he goes off and works for King Francis I in France, and he's all of his work is basically being paid for and financed by these royalty and kings
Right.
and queens and everything. But that also means they want him to kind of do what they want him to do. So his
Always a
struggle
string
to
attached.
exactly that was a big key in the whole movie, that he wants to do all of these things because he at the end of the day is just really curious as an explorer, as an inventor, but he also has to kind of satisfy his masters, if you will. And
Right.
I read a review in the New York Times where they, by virtue of this, compared it to like Oppenheimer, which I was like, that's an interesting comparison. But I sort of understand, because again, like, Robert Oppenheimer, like this man who was incredibly fascinated by the idea of quantum mechanics, and then how that played into the making of the atomic bomb. But then he was of course working under the U.S. government, and like there's certain orders and certain prerogatives of like the people in power that you have to kind of follow. And of course, the
Right.
second half of that movie is all about how he got discredited because he was speaking out against the development of the hydrogen bomb. And it's sort of there are some similarities here in that in the Inventor that are like that, where Leonardo da Vinci is trying to build this ideal city where it's going to have perfect infrastructure and make it a better life for not just royalty, but for everybody living in the city. But the king is most worried about throwing this party where he's going to bring all these other kings of Europe, and he wants a big statue to stroke his ego built for him there. And that's the only thing he keeps asking him about. So, there's like certain back and forth on that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a movie that you can go watch with your kids. It doesn't have any really mature themes. It's a fun time at the theater if you're into stop motion animation. It's not the kind of movie that you're going to be able to recognize, like, oh, it's not a Pinocchio. It's not like one of those Disney movies. So it's not really meant to get, it's a little more experimental than that. So that would be my one downside, is that if you're going in for like a storybook kind of a moved film with that kind of gets wrapped up in a bow at the end, this isn't exactly that. And it's a little abstract in certain areas. The pacing is a little uneven at times, but ultimately it's a movie that I think it's, if you have some time and you don't have anything else that you feel like watching in theaters, then go check this out. Because after all, Barbie's not in theaters anymore. So you got to go see something else. I mean, I watched Barbie like 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else lighthearted, hopefully.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly like it's good counter programming to something like A Haunting in Venice, which is, not exactly lighthearted.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, guys, let us know in the comments, like, what do you think about The Inventor? Is this a movie that was even on your radar? Is this something that you want to go check out? Or if you did see it, what did you think about it? Let us know in the comments. And of course, like and subscribe for more movie reviews like this. We do talk about movies every week on the show, and the next movie that we want to talk about here is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the sequel to Aquaman from 2018. So right before we started the show, we watched the new trailer that just got released this week. So Bridget, I wanted to ask you, what is your take on this trailer, this latest DC movie in a series of DC movies where the last 4 have majorly underperformed or completely bombed? Here comes Aquaman 2, the sequel to 2018's Aquaman that made $1 billion. What did you think about the trailer, and what are your expectations of the movie?
Honestly, it did pique my interest watching it. This is random, but just the beginning scene, it seems really kind of talking about him, and now he's a family man. And it was so weird. I was getting flashbacks to like Shrek 3 when he has all those babies and he like is in his little hut like, oh, I'm a dad now. And so it did kind of seem like, oh, this is like a different side of Aquaman we haven't seen, with his shirt off and his 6-pack. But then, a couple minutes later, he's back at it in the adventure. Gotta save his kingdom. That's kind of the big plot point as the King of Atlantis. So we kind of see him in this role, which was set up from the first movie. And it does look promising. It looks like I have an idea that the theme might be, him balancing his 2 lives in a way and kicking some dark ocean creature butt. Lots of scary looking things that they were fighting with those tritons. So yeah, definitely action-packed for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, Patrick Wilson back as Orm. I think that was a fun part, because it's like the first 20 seconds of the movie very much gave me, like Fast and Furious family vibes.
I don't have friends. I got family.
Like, he's a family man. It's all about that. And of course, he was in the latest Fast and Furious movie, Jason Momoa. So, then it, like you said, it kind of picks up. And what I liked about the rest of the trailer was that it really feels like this is going to be that, like Lethal Weapon-esque, 2, in this case, brothers or half-brothers going on this adventure to stop Black Manta, who, of course, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, he was in the first movie. He was a secondary villain. And now in this movie, it looks like he's taking center stage. It does kind of dive a little bit deeper into the DC mythology with like the Dark Trident, and they're kind of hinting at like there were 7 kingdoms that the King of Atlantis ruled over. Yeah. So they're gonna dive a little bit deeper into that part of the mythology. It's expanding the world that the first Aquaman movie created, and it looks like to me this movie, even though it is now officially at least the last movie in the DCU continuity that began with Man of Steel in 2013. it certainly doesn't look like, at least from this trailer, that it's meant to be like some sort of like big grand conclusion to anything. And there are some, not rumors, but there, people have been talking about, well, Jason Momoa, is he going to stick around as Aquaman in the new DCU under James Gunn and Peter Safran, or is he going to play somebody like Lobo, which is another character that people like would love for him to play, or could he do both? Or like, and then Jason Momoa has on occasion said like, I will always be Aquaman, and and then I think at one point James Gunn said that nobody's going to play more than one character. So like if you put the pieces together, it's still unfortunately pretty vague where things are going. We know there's some actors who are going to be reprising their roles from the DCEU in the DCU, like Amanda Waller is going to continue to be played by Viola Davis. John Cena is going to continue to play Peacemaker. We've got a few other characters like that. But outside of those characters, of course, we know Superman's being recast and basically rebooted, so Henry Cavill's no longer there. And we know the same thing is going to be happening for the Batman character. So, and then, of course, Wonder Woman, there's a little bit of like, Gal Gadot seems to think she's going to be continuing to play the role, but officially we don't know. James Gunn hasn't said anything to the contrary. With Aquaman, my concern becomes, especially if this is a good movie, and if it makes like 500 million or more than 500 million, because it is coming out in December. It's coming out around the same time of year that the first one did. And it's a time of year when there's plenty of money to go around at the box office. So I'm sure if it's good that people are going to go check it out. And much like the first movie, it probably has a good amount of potential to make money. And if it does, then, does that mean we're going to get a third one in the franchise and kind of like have a whole trilogy? Or do you think they'll still kind of say, well, this is the end of this world and now we're moving forward, and no matter how well this movie does, there's going to no more of this Aquaman, at least we're going to go in a different direction? Like, where do you think things are going to go past this?
Just, I don't know. I feel like I've now come to expect that it's never just two. It seems like there's always going to be a third. If they can milk a franchise as much as they can, I feel like they will. Maybe that's just after the Avengers, seeing the first two, and I thought the third was going to be the last, and then there was the fourth. So I wouldn't put it past them to milk this out a little more and get a third movie. It just almost seems weird these days not to have a first, second, and third. But you're right, it really will factor in whether they decide to keep him as Aquaman, which seems to make the most sense at this point, I think. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But one question I did have watching it as well was, I remember, Amber Heard was in the first one, and then there was the whole drama that happened, and a lot of people were saying she wasn't going to be in the second. Maybe saw a glimpse of her, but yeah, it seems like they're cutting ties with dramatic people.
Yeah, I did see her in a couple of shots in this movie trailer. Like, so she's sort of like, there's one particular shot in the trailer, pretty much in like the back half of the trailer, where you can see her clearly. And then I feel like I maybe noticed her in a couple of other spots, but really she wasn't really the focus of the shot. So definitely, I don't know if it's either that they're hiding her in the trailer and she has a bigger role than what we have gotten so far, and based on the trailer itself, or maybe her role is much reduced, because she was like one of the leads in the first movie. She was basically the love interest of Aquaman, and she played a significant role throughout the whole movie. Where it seems like in this one, at least so far, based on that trailer alone, you would believe that there's a lot more Nicole Kidman in there. There's a lot more of Aquaman, Tamora Morrison, Aquaman's dad. There's a lot more of those characters, especially Orm and Aquaman, kind of going on this journey together as half brothers, than there is of Amber Heard's Mira. So that is something I'm curious about. Like, when we get more trailers, I'm sure we'll get at least one more trailer, maybe two. And like, how did it show her in those trailers? Because if we continue to see the pattern that she's not a big part of it, and then we go see the movie and she is, of course, a significant part of the film, then yeah, of course, they're going to be hiding her, and that means they're hiding her in the marketing. I will say, though, like, if they are indeed hiding her in the marketing, I don't blame them, because the last 4 DCEU films, including Black Adam, Shazam 2, The Flash, and Blue Beetle, they all had some level of baggage with them. I think Blue Beetle probably the least amount of baggage, because it was very much, I think there was a lot of positive buzz around it. Unfortunately, the franchise as a whole didn't, and I think that hurt that movie. It was one of the lesser known character that
I agree.
if it was, like coming out at the peak of, let's say, the MCU's powers, like an Ant-Man movie, it would have done really well, and because it was a decent film. But the Flash had the Ezra Miller baggage. Shazam 2 had its own issues with all the visual effects and other things that were going on. They dropped it at like a weird time of year, like in March, where a lot of movies don't tend to make a lot of money. And then we had, Black Adam with its own kind of controversy, whether it was the fact that, oh, Henry Cavill's back, but then Henry Cavill's not back. And James Gunn being hired around the same time. So this movie, if they're doing anything within their power to get away from any potential negative headlines around Amber Heard's involvement in the film, from the marketing standpoint, I totally understand that. I do, but I hope that they don't like completely write her character off, because she is a big part of that story.
The first one, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, what I was most curious about. I was so curious was how are they just going to switch the focus of this next film if they are going to cut her out? I feel like, they have to go tactfully about it. So it'll be interesting to see. I almost am intrigued to see it, even just to see how they do that.
Absolutely. And I will say that this movie will, in my opinion, make probably close to 500 million, if not more, because the first movie was so good. And the first movie came out at a time when it was, I think, the first DC movie since that whole Justice League debacle. And it made $1 billion. So I think the audiences clearly, like, because the movie looked visually amazing. I still think it's probably one of the best looking movies DC has put out in recent years. And this one, the trailer at least, it makes it look like those same visuals are going to be back. I feel like I saw some of the same actors playing the guards, like in the stadium shots where, they're about to do all that battle. And so the bloodthirsty, like they go wild for when in the first movie Orm and Aquaman do battle, and then later on in the final act you see like soldiers on horses and sharks, and I'm like, that's like just it's one of those things where like I didn't think I was ever going to see that on film, but it looks cool as heck, and I am all for it. And this movie trailer kind of has that same vibe, and it's sort of continuing a lot of that. And like I said, the first Aquaman movie came out at a time when, the DCEU was probably down in the dumps because of that whole Justice League debacle and everything. By that time, we had figured out like, oh yeah, Zack Snyder had left the movie, and it wasn't like basically what we got in theaters was not exactly his vision. And then as a result of that, it was a complete. They went in and redid the whole thing, and the whole Joss Whedon controversy. But still, Aquaman managed to kind of work past that into the $1 billion club, the only $1 billion movie in the DCEU. So I have a feeling the audiences can probably put the two things, off on islands, like saying, hey, oh yeah, these last few DC movies, not very good, or did not like him, blah, blah, blah. But Aquaman 2 definitely looks fantastic. So I do feel that it will probably not have as big of an effect on it as from the previous the entries into the DCU, the recent entries into the DCU. I just hope that the next couple of trailers give us even more of an idea of what the story is here, because while this trailer did a pretty good job of telling us what the story is, which a lot of first trailers don't do that, so I do appreciate that. I still would love to get a little more of the nuance behind what exactly is happening here, because a lot of what they teased here like makes me excited. But on the flip side, if you're somebody who is like, don't oversell me on the movie, don't tell me everything in the trailers, then if you watch this trailer, I bet you can watch this trailer and not look at any other piece of marketing for this movie from here till December when the movie comes out, and you will have all that you need to preview this film, because the trailer does a fantastic job of kind of summarizing what this general story is, telling you where Aquaman is in his life right now and where things are headed. And you get to see some of him interacting with Orm. So I do love that. I think Patrick Wilson did a fantastic job in the first movie. I'm excited to see that half-brother love-hate dynamic relationship that they're going to have. So do you think that this is a movie that's going to make anywhere close to $1 billion like the first one? Or do you think this is going to be closer to, like the recent DC movies that have struggled to even cross 400 million at the box office?
That's a good question. I mean, I feel like, yeah, definitely when it first came out, had a lot of power behind it. I mean, even just Jason Momoa himself, I think, excited a lot of people to go see it, just to see him perform in this iconic role. So I think that is kind of fair to say it'll make maybe half of what it did when it first came out. You know, with anything, getting that push for people to come and see the second is always a little bit harder, but you know, I think that the first one did so well that I think people are excited to see this. I do think that's fair, and I know that there has been with the other ones, but this one kind of feels like it's in its own league as far as, you know, the DC films. I think it's definitely got more push behind it than some of the
Yeah.
others for sure.
Yeah, and then like you said, like it's in its own league in the sense that it doesn't feel all that connected to the larger, canon
Yeah.
of the DCEU. It sort of feels like it's happening in its own mini like world, like a bubble within the
Yeah.
larger universe. And that was like a quality of the first film that I think a lot of people appreciated, because if you went and saw that
Yeah.
first Aquaman movie, unless somebody told you that it's part of the DCEU where like Superman and Batman and
Yeah.
Wonder Woman all exist, you really wouldn't know that any of those characters were part of the same world because of
Definitely.
how immersive what you were seeing on screen was
Right.
all unto itself. So I do feel like if they kind of lean on that again, then especially in the case of the situation right now at DC where we don't know who's going to move over to the next continuity, who's being left behind in the old DCEU,
Mhm.
and all the other baggage that the DCU currently carries. I think to make a movie that sort of stands on its own and the only connection that
Would
it
be the
has is really
smartest
to its
thing.
predecessor, it probably plays in its favor. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
hoping that, for good things. This trailer was
Yeah,
probably one of the better trailers I've seen all year, and I'm excited. We're only a
I
couple of months
agree.
away, and yeah, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I'm excited to see where this goes, regardless of whether
Yeah.
Jason Momoa continues in the role past this or not. So, guys, let us know in the comments
Right.
below what you think about Aquaman and the Last Kingdom's first trailer. Do you feel like they gave away too much? Do you feel like this was the right mix of, giving us a look at all the storylines in the movie, all the characters that are back? Are you excited to see the movie now, or do you think this is gonna be another flop from DC like we have had recently with all the other movies that have come out this year? So let us know in the comments. Of course, like and subscribe for more content like this on DC Daily. We covered more DC news like this every day of the week, Monday through Friday. So now, before we wrap up the show, I did want to ask you. So next week, we have got The Expendables making a return to movie screens for the first time in almost a decade. I researched
Yeah.
this, and apparently the third Expendables movie came out in 2014. And
Oh my
I was like,
gosh.
wow, like that's like almost 10 years ago. So,
Yeah.
and even back then, it was like, like Sylvester Stallone is pretty old. And like now, like 10 years later, here we are again. I mean, so we've got, of course, Jason Statham back. Megan Fox is a new addition to the cast. We've got, some of the other usual suspects, back in this movie from the previous films. I didn't see Terry Crews in the trailer, and he was a part of the previous movies, but it looks like Randy Couture is back. So it's a movie that's trying to bring back a franchise that I felt like after the third movie had basically run its course, because I'm like, how many more ways can you spin this story? Like, they're a
Right.
mercenary group that go on missions. I suppose you can make a TV show out of it, maybe, but they didn't do that. So, what do you think about The Expendables 4? Or, I mean, the way they spell it is like Expendables with like one of the E's as a
With
4.
a
So,
yeah.
yeah, I like the whole wordplay. Like, what do you think about this? Are you excited to go check it out?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely given it its due course in time, which I feel like is, yeah, like a fourth movie is definitely, I don't know, you know, sometimes it's like sequel after sequel can definitely, I mean, look at Shrek. Like, that's always been
Hmm.
like my thing where I'm like, okay, enough with the sequels. But, you know, they've given it a decade to kind of maybe write a good script, come up with a good plot. And I kind of feel like that will maybe make me want to go see it, because I feel like when it's something that's maybe too close in time, that can make me feel like, oh, I just saw it. But I think
Yeah.
it's, you know, maybe they've had time to really come up with something new, creative, different. And yeah, it kind of does make me intrigued to see it.
Yeah, and they've got some fresh blood in it. Like I mentioned, Megan Fox is going to be in her
Yeah,
first of
yeah.
these films. Um, we had, I think, Ronda Rousey in the last one, or the third one. So I don't think she's in this one. I don't know what happened to her character in that one. Dolph Lundgren is back. We were talking about Aquaman earlier, and he's got a role in those movies, and he's back in this one. He's been in, I think he was in the second and third one as well. 50 Cent is in this movie. I think that's his first time in this franchise. Tony Jaa, who's a big mixed martial arts like actor, and he's hugely popular in like those Hong Kong movies. So I'm excited to see him kind of get another chance at fame in a Hollywood franchise. He's really underappreciated, I think, out here, and I'm excited to see all the action sequences. Jason Statham, of course, had the Meg 2 come out earlier this year, which was a very over the top movie that was one of those just turn your brain off and watch it and don't think about how unrealistic any of the action on screen is. I get the feeling this movie may be a little bit of that too. What I was impressed by when watching the trailer is though Sly Stallone, he looks younger than he did in the last movie, and that to me was like, what, like 9 years have gone by. Like what? Like how? Why? I mean, and like you said, the biggest thing about this movie that is exciting to me is that they've sort of, by waiting it out for 9 years, avoided that franchise fatigue, or whatever franchise fatigue there was 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm sure people are now looking at this as like, oh, they're back, but it's not like there's 30 years have passed and now they're super old. I mean, they were old to begin with.
It's in a good time frame.
Yeah, there's a decent gap here. It's not too long. I mean, for some people, it might be like 10 years later. But I'm excited to see how good these movies are not meant to be like masterpieces or some kind of like Oscar bait kind of a movie. All it is go watch them, get into some action and shoot some guns and all that stuff. I personally wouldn't go check this movie out on opening weekend, but like I know for the show we're gonna go watch it and we're gonna talk about it. I can't wait to watch the movie that comes out 2 weeks from now, which is The Creator. But in the meantime, I'm certainly happy to bide my time by going to watch The Expendables 4 in theaters. Yeah. The cast looks exciting. Hopefully we'll make a decent amount of money. These movies usually don't cost much to make, so they don't have to make a lot of money to break even. Do you have any last thoughts, any predictions for this film, or are you just excited to go check it out?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of billboards for it out here, so I do think it is going to draw in a decent crowd. That's just from seeing it. Yeah, I think the marketing obviously is getting it right in your face. So, yeah, I think it's going to definitely. I mean, even me, I'm not a huge action fan, but it does look interesting for sure. And I mean, love Jason Statham, so I think that the A-list stars that they've got in there are definitely going to draw some people out just to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and you know what? You gotta go watch something until that Taylor Swift movie comes out. So you might as well go watch The Expendables.
And always a good excuse to eat popcorn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best parts of going to a movie theater. So guys, let us know in the comments below, what do you think about The Expendables 4? Are you excited to see this franchise seemingly rising back from the dead after a 10-year hiatus? Like, are you gonna go check this movie out? Did you even like the first three? Did you care for this movie? Did you know this movie was coming out? Let us know in the comments below, and of course, like and subscribe for more content like this. And on that note, it's time to end the show. It's been fantastic talking to you, Bridget. Your first go at it. We're excited to have you on the team. We'll have you back here, I'm sure, soon enough on more shows like this. And of course, for the love of movies, go out and check out the best movie that you can in the movie theater, and then come back and tell us what you thought about it. We'll do the same, and then we'll meet you back here next week on Oh So Curious. Until then, guys, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.